What's up guys, it's Tony from Streetball Strategies, where we use strategy to build your streetball legacy. Today we're talking about weight loss, and more specifically, losing excess fat. At the recording of this video, it is the beginning of 2020, and with many people making New Year's resolutions, many of which include getting in shape and losing weight, I figured it's the perfect time to give you guys a quick overview on how I feel is the most efficient way to lose weight. Now, a few notes to make here at the very beginning. One is that this is not just a basketball video. It's not just for basketball players. The principles that I'm going to go over can be used for pretty much everybody. A caveat being that I'm not going to address any special needs in this video, such as if you're a vegan or vegetarian or ketogenic, or you have some kind of physical or biological needs that are specific to you. I'm not going to try to address any specifics like that in this video. This is just for the general public in terms of how to lose weight. Also, I'm not a certified anything. I'm not a certified trainer. I'm certainly not a certified nutritionist, because the field of nutrition is ever changing and ever evolving, and it's a crazy profession to be involved in. Those of you who are nutritionists, my hat is off to you guys. I could certainly never be a nutritionist with as frequently and rapidly as that field changes. So you're just going to have to trust me when it comes to my strategy for losing weight. My own experience is that up until my early 20s, I was chubby. I played basketball all the time, but I ate terribly. And when I got to be in my 20s, I decided that I was only going to be in my 20s once. I was only going to be in that physical prime one time in my life, and so I wanted to see what I could do with being in that time frame of my life if I could actually get into shape. And I did. I took my terrible DNA and I actually did get into shape. And the more shape I got into, the better basketball I played, and the better basketball I played, the better shape I wanted to get into. And I continued that cycle throughout my 20s. And so I do know and understand what it is like to lose weight and to get in shape. I just want to go over the basic principles of how to lose weight. The principles that I'm going to go over, I can make individual videos in the future. If you guys want me to go into more depth of some of the topics I'm about to cover, please let me know down in the comments. I will be sure to address those videos in the future. But for now, for time's sake, we're just going to go over the general principles. So how do we lose weight? There are two modalities when it comes to our bodies being able to shed our excess body fat. One is the way we eat, the nutrition that we take in and how we fuel our bodies. And the other is exercise, or working out, or training, or whatever you want to call it. When you compare the two, when you compare how you eat to how you exercise, when you just make that direct comparison between the two of them, in terms of importance, what you eat, your nutrition is way up there, and how you exercise is somewhere around here. So when we talk about how you eat, when we talk about your nutrition, the focus that we are trying to have is on your insulin levels. So insulin is a hormone that is produced by our pancreas, and most of us know that insulin's main job is to maintain our body's blood sugar. Something else that insulin does that doesn't get discussed as much is it is a transport system for the nutrients in our body. So insulin transports the nutrients from our lower intestines to the appropriate cells in our body. And what it does is insulin approaches the cell, and when it reaches the cell then opens up to allow the nutrients in. The insulin acts as a signal to the cell that it needs to open up in order to absorb the nutrients. The reason we want to control our insulin levels is because when we eat food, when we eat anything that has calories in it, we raise our insulin levels. But there are certain kinds of foods that make our insulin levels spike. When they spike, we have too much insulin. And so when the insulin reaches the cell and the cell opens up for the insulin, because there's so much insulin, the cell gets flooded with insulin. And because there's so much at one time, because it's spiked, your body can't process all that insulin all at once. So the cell gets flooded with the insulin, and then because there's so much of it and your body can't process it all at once, it saves that cell for later energy use, and that's known as fat. What we want to do instead is to raise our insulin just enough so that we can open up that cell, but then when the insulin gets to the cell, instead of flooding the cell with insulin, it gets out of the way and lets the nutrients that you've eaten go into the cell, so that the cell can then absorb those nutrients that you have chosen to eat and use those nutrients to then energize your body. So now that we've discussed insulin and how insulin works and what it's for, we need to talk about what causes your insulin to spike. The number one cause of insulin spike is sugar. Sugar is the enemy. We want to eliminate sugar, get rid of it altogether, literally eliminate it. Now, I realize that that's almost impossible to do because, number one, sugar is probably the most addictive substance known to man. And number two, it's in so many food sources that it's hard to get rid of it. And because we're trying to avoid sugar as much as possible, we need to know what sugar is in, what contains sugar. And so you have the obvious things like anything that's sweet, right? If it's sweet, it has sugar in it, it's bad for you, avoid it, right? And when I say sugar, I'm not just talking about the generic white powder that you put in your coffee to make it palatable, right? I'm talking about every form of sugar, and there's so many forms of it. So it's not just that powdered white sugar, it's also stuff like fruit and fruit juices and sodas and pops and energy drinks, and even stuff like milk. People think that milk is good for you, and I make the argument that no, it is not. There are things in milk that are good for you. The vitamin D in milk is good for you. The protein in milk is good for you, but milk also contains lactose. Lactose is sugar. Lactose is what makes milk palatable, that it makes it taste good to you. If it didn't have lactose in it, have you ever had lactose-free milk? Like, not the kind that's sold in stores and it's got whatever it has into it to make it taste good, just milk that has been strained and has had lactose eliminated from it. It's terrible. You could never drink that. Lactose is what gives it its palatability. It makes it taste good to you. And the reason for that is because it's sugar. It tastes good to you because lactose is sugar. When you're in the store and you're looking at products and you're trying to figure out if something has sugar in it or not, flip it over, look at the nutritional info list, right? See how much sugar it has in it. It may not have any sugar. It may say 0 sugars or 0 added sugars. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have sugar in it. It just means that whatever sugar it has in it, they're not calling it sugar. It's called something else. So for instance, milk has lactose. Lactose is sugar. Pretty much anything, any word, any ingredient in the ingredients list that comes below or next to the nutritional info chart, if it ends in OSE, ose, that is sugar. Words like fructose or glucose or lactose or maltose or dextrose, all of those are sugars. They're just different forms of sugar, and your liver, despite what the name of it is, your liver treats it all the same. It will spike your insulin despite what its name is. Anything in the ingredients list that you know is sweet, that has sugar in it, that's sugar. Regardless of what the name is, if it says honey in the ingredients list, that's fine. It's sweet, it has sugar in it. It's gonna spike your insulin. Anything that says syrup, right? Fructose syrup, high fructose syrup, that's sugar. It's gonna spike your insulin. Companies know Sugar makes food taste good. Sugar is cheap for them to put in their food. They also know sugar is addicting. They're gonna put it in your food. They're gonna hide it in the ingredients list. You need to know what it's called. You need to know what to look for and know that if you eat that, it's gonna spike your insulin. Outright sugar isn't your only problem. You also need to look out for carbohydrates. Carbohydrates and grains have the same effect on your body that outright sugar does. They can spike your insulin. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we'll say that there are two forms of carbohydrates. There are carbohydrates that when they digest in your system, they digest fast, and there are carbohydrates that digest slowly. So the carbohydrates that digest quickly are known as high glycemic carbohydrates. The carbohydrates that digest slowly are known as low glycemic carbohydrates. Carbs that digest quickly are the carbs that will spike your insulin. When carbs are digested more slowly, your insulin will still rise, but it won't necessarily spike. And like we discussed, when you spike your insulin, you are saving fat cells to be used later. You want to avoid carbs as much as possible, just in general, but if you do eat carbs, if that's your choice, try to steer yourself towards the low glycemic carbs. So the bad carbs, the high glycemic carbs, would be stuff like rice and pasta and bread, whereas the low glycemic carbs would be stuff like some fruits, some vegetables, some nuts, eggs, things like that. I advise just in general to try to stay away and limit carbs as much as possible. But if you're going to go down the route of nuts and vegetables, know that when we're talking about vegetables, I recommend the green leafy vegetables. For those, I say that you can have as much as you want. Any quantity of green leafy vegetables that you want is perfectly fine. The reason I lean towards those and I stay away from a lot of other vegetables is because depending on how they're grown and what they are, they will still have healthy vitamins for you, but some vegetables are more inflammatory on your organs and your cells than others, whereas green leafy vegetables, not so much. And then just a quick note on nuts. If you choose to have nuts as a low glycemic carbohydrate option, stay away from peanuts, and contrary to popular belief, stay away from pistachios. They are actually more, in terms of on the nut scale, they are higher in carbs than, say, almonds or walnuts or macadamia nuts. Those are the kind of nuts you want to lean towards if you're going to incorporate nuts into your nutrition. So if we're eliminating carbs, if we're eliminating sugar, if we're eliminating grains as much as we possibly can, you may be asking yourself, well, what about energy, right? It's widely known that carbohydrates give us energy, right? And that's true. To a degree, that's true, because when we eat carbohydrates, they are what is easiest for your body to break down and use as energy. They are readily available energy sources. So you eat a piece of bread, it goes into your stomach, goes down to your lower intestines, and it can immediately be used as your body for energy. But in order to do that, it spikes your insulin in order to do that. So if we're getting rid of the carbohydrates and the grains and the sugar, what does our body use for energy? Well, obviously, if you don't have those carbs and those grains and those sugars in your system to be used as energy, your body still needs to produce it from somewhere, and because of that, it will start to take energy from your fat stores. But you still need to eat, right? So because you still need to eat, what are we going to eat instead of those grains and those carbs and those sugars? Well, we're going to eat lean protein and healthy fats. In terms of lean protein choices for food, we're talking stuff like fish, like tilapia or cod. We're talking about plain Greek yogurt. We're talking about stuff like beans and lentils. We obviously have stuff like skinless chicken breast, cottage cheese. We obviously also have stuff like lean red meat and egg whites. I myself prefer to stick towards more red meat, lean beef products, and not so much towards the cottage cheese or the Greek yogurt, only because of the potential inflammatory effects that dairy can have on my system in particular. You may deal with dairy better than I do, but I prefer to keep protein lean and high while trying to avoid anything that's going to cause any kind of inflammation. When we talk healthy fats, we're talking about things like whole eggs and fish food sources such as salmon and sardines. We've also talked about nuts being a good form of protein. They are also a good form of healthy fats. Just again, stay away from regular peanuts and pistachios. Also, you're probably aware of how avocados are a good healthy fat for you. And then we have oils like cooking oils, stuff that you would cook your food in. Anything that is fruit-based makes up the best oils, the healthiest oils for your body. Things such as olive oils and coconut oils, almond oils, things like that. You want to stay away from stuff like vegetable oil and canola oil when it comes to the oils that you're going to be cooking your food with. So basically, we're going to keep everything as low grain and low sugar and low carbohydrate as possible, while keeping protein pretty high and keeping the healthy fats that we take in at a moderate level. Just a quick note with the fats, know that because fats are so calorically dense, it doesn't take a whole lot of fat to get you the amount that you're going to need. A little bit of macadamia nuts goes a long way. A little bit of coconut oil goes a long way. Anything that is healthy fat based, because it's so calorically dense, a little bit goes a long way. And I know that I'm not giving you guys any sort of proportions specific to, eat this much protein to this much fat, or this is how many grams of protein I want you to have, and this is how many grams of fat I want you to have. I'm not going to go into specifics in this video. It's too complicated and every person is different. Everybody has a different scenario for themselves that they need this much fat and this much protein, and so I'm not going to get into that in this video. There will be future videos that cover things like that though. So now that we've covered how to use nutrition to manipulate and control your insulin and thus controlling how much fat your body is storing, let's talk about the other modality to losing weight, which is exercise.
I'm coming fresh off that weight scale, fresh off that weight scale, fresh off that weight scale.